This is the Thriving Artist Podcast with Andrea Fleming, where we talk about how to go from surviving as an artist to thriving as an artist. Let's go.
Hey, welcome back to the podcast and Happy New Year, because it is now 2024 by the time you're reading, by the time you're watching or listening to this podcast. So Happy New Year. And you probably have already started implementing your 2024 goals or your first quarter goals. If that's you, then this podcast will be super helpful for you because you may be already getting those first pings of doubt. Maybe not yet. Maybe you're still super excited and you're still like super motivated, but the doubt usually does come. It's kind of inevitable when you are implementing goals. So whether it comes in the first week or the end of the first quarter, this is going to be super helpful, this episode for you today. It's called a confidence injection because this is one of the concepts that I use to give myself a quick boost of confidence before I go into an audition or when I'm in rehearsals or performances. And it's this idea of the number one fan. So the number one fan concept is the antithesis to the perception that you are performing for your haters. So let's talk about that first before we get into the number one fan concept. So a lot of us, when we do auditions or rehearsals or even performances, we get nervous or anxious or stressed out because subconsciously we are perceiving ourselves to be performing for our haters. Now, our mind's not, I cannot speak English. I'm just getting over COVID, so bear with me. Our minds might not be blatantly perceiving the individual people we're performing for as haters, right? It might not be going, oh my gosh, that person's my hater, but it subtly is perceiving you as presenting for people who don't really appreciate your work or are not obsessed with your work. So it's thinking stuff like, oh my gosh, this person is judging me. Or, oh no, they're looking for my mistakes. They're seeing when I'm going to go wrong, or they're looking for when I'm going to go wrong. They're waiting for me to crack on this note, right? This is something that maybe it doesn't always come up in rehearsals or performances, but a lot of times is why people feel so anxious and stressed in auditions. Because, I mean, the objective reality is they are assessing you to see whether or not you are a good fit for the production that they're casting or a good fit for the role that they're casting. However, thinking of them as being judgmental or haters of your performance, or thinking of them as looking at you through a lens of anything other than trying to see if you're a good fit or wanting you to do well is going to cause you stress, right? It's a way of our brain looking for a threat. It's a way of our brain looking for whether or not people are looking out for our best interest, right? So I just umbrella this all under thinking that we're performing for our haters. You can call it whatever you want, whatever works for you. But if you resonate with all that I just said, it's likely that you're thinking you're performing for your haters or for people that are judging you or for people who have doubts in your talents. So as you probably have experienced, when you're having those thoughts and you're perceiving those people that way, it doesn't feel very good. You start actually looking for the ways that you're messing up or for the ways that you don't fit or you don't belong or the ways that you're going wrong, right? You either turn that all back on yourself and you become your own judger, or you start to become retaliatory, or you start to become disconnected from the people behind the table, right? Sometimes it's both of those things, one or the other, or both of those things. So when we are in this mindset, that's usually the reason or one of the reasons why we don't have a good experience when we audition, or we have a lot of stress when we're in rehearsals, or we get super anxious when we're in performances, right? We think that people are judging us. Now, let's bring it back to the number one fan concept. So the number one fan concept really works well because it's the opposite of thinking of performing for your haters. It's thinking that you're performing for your number one fan, someone or people who really want you to do well, who are looking for the ways that you're awesome, looking for the ways that you shine. They're looking at your strengths and highlighting your strengths more than focusing on your weaknesses. It's as if you're performing for people who can see you do no wrong, or for people who, even if you do make a mistake, they understand that you're human and they let the mistake go. So the effect of viewing your audience or your auditioner, your auditors, auditioners, how do we call these people? The people behind the table, that's what I always call them. The impact of viewing them as your number one fans is how it makes you feel, right? Because when you're thinking of performing for people who love your work, for people who are looking at your strengths rather than your weakness, for people who are seeing you as human when you do make a mistake and not making it such a big deal, it makes you feel calm. It makes you feel more relaxed. It makes you feel like you have got a handle on things, right? It's not a big deal if you make a mistake. It's not a big deal if your voice cracks a little bit on that note, or if you drop a line, or if you, for instance, I don't know, what are some other things that we do in auditions or something? Those are the ones that I can think of because those were my biggest fears when I used to have a lot of anxiety. They When we're looking at the audience in that way, we stop judging ourselves so harshly, right? So we don't feel as stressed and anxious. We also start to feel more confident because we're focused more on our strengths. We're focused more on what we're doing well. We're focused more on the story. We're more present. We're more engaged. We're more in flow because we're not so in our heads and being so judgy on ourselves, right? So it also opens up the opportunity that we're more connected to the people behind the table, right? We're not thinking of them as our enemies. We're thinking of them as, if not collaborators, then at least people who really adore us. So we feel more connected to them. And chances are they probably feel that as well. They probably feel that you feel more connected to them and that you're more open in your energy. So that's the impact, right? Is that we stop having such a terrible feeling about auditioning or performing, and we start to feel more confident, more calm, and likely we start to enjoy the process a lot more. That's from thinking that these people are our number one fans. Now, it may seem far-fetched right now to think of people who are auditioning you as your number one fans, or even in rehearsals. Like, a lot of times it can be hard to think of our peers as our number one fans because they do what we do. They know the details of our technique, our craft, and all this stuff. So they have a keen eye and ear for these things. So it might be far-fetched. Maybe you don't want to go as far as to think they are your number one fans. That's totally fine. Even if you got to, these people are human as well, and there are things that I do that they might like, right? There are things that I do that they might find value in, that they might find benefit in. Even starting there is going to be a lot better than thinking of these people as your haters. So how do we get into this number one fan concept, right? If you are more open to using the number one fan concept, here are a couple of ways that I find is very easy for me to get into the number one fan concept. The first way that I have found is by actually thinking of someone who is my number one fan or someone who's a really big fan of my work and visualizing them watching my audition, or visualizing them watching my performance and getting that feeling in my body of them watching me. So for instance, my sister is one of my biggest fans. I can do no wrong to her. Like, even when I make a mistake, she still finds a way to compliment me and find strengths in what I'm doing. She's like a super lover of my work. I don't know. She's just awesome. I always love performing around her. I always love singing around her. I never feel anxious or nervous performing around her. Even when I had really bad anxiety, I never felt anxious singing around her because she always found a way to love something about what I did. So if I were to go into an audition or performance, what I would do is think about performing my audition piece in front of her and thinking about how she would react to some of my choices, or how she would react to even some of my mistakes, and what her response would be. And I would get the feeling in my body of what it's like to actually do the presentation in front of her. What would my muscles be doing? Would they be super tense or would they be super relaxed? How would I be breathing? What would my emotional state be? What would my nervous system response be? And I would just embody that entire feeling. I would also embody the feeling of her reaction to me and her response to my work. So a lot of times she'll be like, even if I do make mistakes, she'll be like, well, I know you're gonna be hard on yourself, and I know you're gonna think about the time that you did this, and I totally get it. But I just want to point out to you that when you hit this note, it was so incredible. Like I felt my body lift, or whatever she might say, right? Whatever her response might be. It's usually she spins it in a way that's super positive and she finds something to love about it. So I will imagine myself reacting to that and what my emotional response would be to that and what my body would feel like to that, right? So the reason why I go through this process is because I want to imprint on my body and get my body in the state of feeling that I would be in when she's watching me, right? I want to get my nervous system already in that calm and confident state. I want to get my emotions already in that calm or neutral state that it would be in. And I want to get my mind into a place where it's, usually when I'm in a situation where she's listening to me sing, my mind is super clear. It's super zen. It's not super judgy, right? I might be like, oh, shoot, I made a mistake, but I wouldn't be beating myself up, right? I want to already be starting in that position when I walk into the room. And usually when you're starting in that position, your body is in your nervous system is in a position to be able to maintain that, right? A lot more than if you were already going in anxious and nervous, right? So you want to be starting in that position. And you already have access from the visualization and from the embodiment to be able to recall that when you go into the room. So that's why that works. Now, maybe you're thinking, I don't have someone like that for me. Nobody loves what I do. Everybody thinks I suck. I highly doubt that, but if you are in that mind state right now, that's totally fine. You don't have to access your own number one fans or your own fans. You can instead visualize what it would be like to be someone who does have that experience of having number one fans, right? So an easy go-to is Beyonce. Beyonce, we definitely know the Beehive will go to bat for her no matter what. It doesn't matter what she do. This lady can do no wrong. It doesn't matter if she pooped on stage. They would still be like, yeah, but she did it looking fierce and her dance moves were amazing around the pile of poop, right? So it doesn't matter. Like her number one fans think she's the queen of the universe. So I want you to imagine what it would feel like to be Beyonce performing for her number one fans. Like we've seen videos of her messing up online, right? Her falling on stage or her like dress coming undone or her hair getting caught in the fan, right? She never makes a big deal of it, probably because she's really, really practiced at making mistakes, but also it doesn't hurt that her fans, they don't care either, right? So imagine you are Beyonce and you make a mistake, your voice cracks, you sing flat, which doesn't really happen to Beyonce, but just use your imagination here. What would it be like for you to do that in front of your number one fans, the Beehive, right? You probably would feel safe. You probably would feel supported, right? You probably would feel like, you know what, they worship the ground I walk on, so it's not that big of a deal. You can use that feeling, right? You can use that visualization to capture the same emotional state and the same nervous system response, right? You do that for anyone. Maybe Beyonce is not your girl. Maybe when you think of her, you like break out in hives. I don't know. There's some people who really don't like Beyonce. I don't get it, but if that's you, think of someone that you do really love, right? Think of someone that you are a number one fan of, right? What do you think it would be like to be them with you watching them and you being an audience member, right? You already know that you would think that they're awesome. Even if they made a mistake, it's not a big deal, right? How would it feel to perform in front of you if you were that person? So those are three ways that you can get into that, right? By pretending that you are performing for your number one fan, by pretending you are Beyonce and you're performing for the Beehive, or by pretending that you are the artist that you are the number one fan of and embodying and visualizing that experience for yourself. If you are someone who can't get into the number one fan idea, but you can get into the idea of, oh, these people are human. They see me as human, and they at least can admire some things about me. You can use the same concepts to get into that mindset as well. Who's someone who they may not be your number one fan, but they still can admire some things about your work, right? Maybe it's a teacher that you have. Maybe it's one of your peers who you know that they still like critique some of the things that you do, but you kind of feel safe around them because you know that they still recognize that your mistakes aren't a huge deal, and that they give you room to grow, they give you space to be human, and they still love some things about you, right? You can do the same thing with that. Or an artist that you love where you're just like, you know what, this person is not perfect. I'm not their number one fan, but I can totally appreciate what they do. You can use the same concepts for this. What I would do if you're in that position is start there, but why not stretch yourself and see if you can get to the number one fan concept? Because when you can, it's such an easy switch to jump into, and it's such a powerful impact. It has such a powerful impact on your emotional state when you can jump into the number one fan concept. So, what do you think of that? I would love to hear your feedback after you try this and tell me how it impacted you. How did it affect your ability to audition? Or how did it affect your emotional state when you were auditioning? Or if this is something that you would love to apply to rehearsals or performances, what was the impact on your ability to perform? I would love to hear feedback. Leave it in the comments, leave it in the reviews. If you want to message me on Instagram, I'm totally open to that. I would love to have a conversation about this concept with you. Until then, I will see you in the next week.